Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our show. We are so excited you're with us today. And I have a special guest with us. Normally, Dave's taking the seat, but he's on a flight right now in the middle of somewhere. And so we have Joel Wymer stepping in to take some hits for us. Joel, so welcome to our show. Hopefully you can hear me okay, Joel. Looks like it froze there. All right. Well, we lost Joel. Let's see if we can get him back in here. So again, as we're waiting for Joel to get back in here, it'll take just a moment and we'll get him to rejoin. Thank you for being here with us today. We're super excited to be talking about retirement and diving into all topics. We have some really great questions today where we're going to be breaking down Roth IRA. We're going to be breaking down our SEPs, our self-employment plans, and talking about our buckets, our 3-bucket system, and also about keeping that emergency fund. Some really great questions we have coming in, and let's see if we can get Joel back up on here one more time. All right, so just bear with me just one more moment here, and we'll see if we can get Joel back in. And again, thank you for joining us. For those here that are live on a replay, we're always here talking retirement every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. Very excited to have you with us. And again, we'll get Joel back on here in just a moment and see if we can get him back to come on and answer some questions. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the comments and we'll do our best to get those answered as soon as we get Joel back on here. So give me just one moment. We are afraid of this. Sometimes we have internet issues that pop up, and that's okay. Here we are.
Here we are.
Joel, welcome back. So glad you're with us.
Still here. Yeah. Got on the hotspot, CR, so hopefully that holds up for us.
Good. All right, Joel. Well, Joel, before we get started, could you tell us a little about who you are and what you're doing right now?
So I own a business called Wymer Wealth Management. Been teaching the strategies that Dave Hall's been talking about for 25 to 30 years, helping clients work not only into retirement, but all the way through retirement successfully. Right now, I'm coming to you from Miami, Florida, which is why we're working through some internet issues, but hopefully this will hold up and we'll be able to answer some questions.
And Joel, we're so glad that you're here with us, especially, I mean, being down in Miami, it sounds miserable and cold down there.
It's tough. It really is, CR. It's about 78 and a little rain today. So, we're roughing it out here.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, Joe, we work really close, especially as we're in different webinars. So we go through the Changing World of Retirement webinar. And it's a great webinar where we go through and we're educating, like you said, everyone, not on just getting to retirement, but getting through retirement. And what is the one thing you love most about teaching in that particular course?
That course is pretty all-inclusive and comprehensive, and it really does a great job of helping people understand from a 30,000-foot level, I think, where they should be heading towards and the areas they need to address to be successful to get all the way through retirement.
And Joe, what I've done is I pulled a few questions from one of the latest webinars you were part of, and I also have some from different people who submitted questions in. So if you're ready, I'm going to jump into our first question here. And again, this is a Q&A. So if you're here joining us live, and if you have a question that we can throw at Joel, go ahead and get that submitted in that comment section. And again, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. It sounds like we're not as always excited to be down there in Miami, but boy, Joel, we're just excited for you to be there.
Well, thank you.
All right, so let's start with our first question here from Lynn. So Lynn is wondering, do you suggest at retirement to have enough in bucket 1 to equal 6 months of living expenses plus the amount of debt?
Well, I can tell by that question that Lynn has watched the video, the webinar. So I would say ideally, as you move into retirement, you want to eliminate any major debt that you have. But if that can't be done, if that's just not possible as you move into your retirement years, you want the actual 6 months plus the payment on that debt to be set aside so that if something were to happen an interruption in any kind of retirement income, you could actually then make those payments for that 6-month period until things got back to normal.
And Joe, let's go back and talk about this, because if somebody's here for the first time and they're looking at this saying bucket one, what is bucket one?
So bucket one is the taxable bucket. And the way we understand that, or the way we know it's a taxable bucket, is that you get a 1099 each and every year from that bucket. So in other words, any interest or dividends or capital gains that you make during the year, then you'll get a 1099 for that. And then that will be reported to the IRS, and you have to pay tax on that on an annual basis. That's the key there. You're paying tax on an annual basis. So it's a great place to house your emergency reserve liquid cash there. Now, the trade-off is, as we know in today's environment, you're just not going to get a great rate of return, but that's not the purpose for that money. We actually have, a purpose of setting aside that money to take care of us if something unexpected happens.
And Joe, with this, there is a 3-bucket system. So that's bucket one. Before we get into the rest of the questions, tell me about bucket 2 and 3.
Bucket 2 is where probably most of the people on the Facebook Live today have saved most of their serious retirement money, CR, and that's in the tax deferred bucket. And those are things like IRAs, 401ks, 457 plans, 403bs, anything that you defer the taxation on that money into the future at some point in time. And then as you access that money, you would have to pay tax on it. So that's the tax deferred bucket number 2. And then bucket number 3, my favorite bucket of all, is the tax-free bucket, which we talk extensively about in the webinar also, because that's where we want everything else to end up after we have the optimal or perfect amounts of money in bucket number 1 and bucket number 2. There are no taxes on that bucket. Once the money gets in there, you can access it tax-free. It grows tax-free.
And if you're here joining us live, I'd love to know where you have your money right now. Do you have it in bucket 1, 2, or 3? And I think it's going to really help us to understand where you're headed, or at least where you want to be going if you're looking at this 3-bucket system. All right, Joel, let's jump over to our next question here. So this particular question is, do you see a particular dollar amount of retirement savings where you recommend a single person not consider Roth IRA conversions or contributions?
Yeah, another really good question. If we go back to the webinar where we talk in retirement, this question hits right at home there. We want to, many people think that just because we have that tax-free bucket, you want all your money in that bucket. However, the IRS allows us to make some income tax-free out of the other 2 buckets. So we don't want to over-convert to the tax-free bucket, because then we're paying too much tax to get it into that 3rd bucket. So yes, a single person especially, probably, and this is a general rule of thumb, but maybe $250,000 of money in that tax-deferred bucket, so that they can pull that money out in retirement and let their standard deduction offset that money as it comes out of that bucket, thereby making it tax-free.
And Joe, with that, I wanted to bring up another comment that said, I see some people with lower assets thinking Roth is the only way to go, and they'll be losing out on the standard deduction completely. But you're saying, hey, let's talk about this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the exact point. So the question, whoever asked this question is in tune with that, because the exact point is we don't want to over-convert and leave nothing in the tax-deferred bucket, because we waste our standard deduction in retirement, which means we could have taken money out of their tax-free, but we failed to do it because we over-converted everything to the tax-free bucket.
And Joel, I do want to have a shout out to you here. Gary Wong is joining us from San Francisco, and he's saying, good morning, CR and Joel. And it looks like beautiful and cloudy where he's at today.
Yeah, Gary's in another warm climate. San Francisco is a beautiful place.
Yeah, definitely true. And I did ask the question of where everyone is having most of their assets. And E-Ring joining us from YouTube said too much money in bucket 2. Let's talk about that for a minute, Joel.
Okay, so yeah, that's another good question. So we have to strategically get the money from bucket 2 to bucket 3, or that tax-free bucket. So one of the ways that we want to do that is we want to make systematic shifts from tax deferred to tax free. Now that's a very involved question. So there are a lot of things that can go into that. There are some things that can defer money down the road that you don't have to worry about until you're 80, 85 years old. Also, many people use, and I know this is a kind of a loaded term, but many people use reverse mortgages to access cash in their homes to pay tax on Roth conversions, getting that money into that third bucket. So a lot of different ways to do it. The real answer is start as early as possible so that the pain isn't as great as it can be if you wait too long and procrastinate.
And with that one, Joel, I wanted to bring up the other part from E-Ring here. He said that Roth conversions and real estate rental losses do not mix. If one converts too much money, then real estate losses are gone.
Yeah, really good point. So you have to be very in tune with your personal tax situation and when you're making Roth conversions. So and same thing with inflation. We hear so much about inflation today, but personal inflation is far more impactful than some of the ways that the government measures inflation. So you have to really look at your personal situation in order to make all these conversions or any kind of moves you're making to optimize taxation work for you.
Great. Thank you so much. And E-Ring, thank you so much for your comments through YouTube. Gary, also, it's a good morning from San Francisco here. It's lunchtime and I'm in Georgia. So it's nice. It's about 40, 45, not as great as it was last week, but it's definitely not the beautiful San Francisco or Miami, but we're just very grateful for you guys to be joining us live here today. All right, let's jump down to another question I have here. So let's get this one from Priscilla. Assuming I'm already retired and taking RMDs, why should I pay taxes today on a Roth conversion plus additional tax on Social Security instead of leaving the residual to my beneficiaries?
Yeah, so that great question, because if you leave money to heirs, you're probably leaving it in their years where they're earning their highest income. So if we leave money in the tax deferred bucket, part of the 2018 law that President Trump passed means that you have to empty that bucket in 10 years. So you have no choice in the matter. So you're piling, if you pass on money out of that tax deferred bucket, you're piling all that money onto your heirs at a time when they're probably earning their highest incomes in their lifetime, or their earning years. So one of the reasons to get money over to the tax deferred, the tax free bucket, is that money has already satisfied Uncle Sam. The tax has already been paid on all of that money, even as you pass it to your heirs. So it still has to come out of there in a 10-year period, but it does not, there's no more additional tax that's due on that money when you give that to your heirs. So it's a very efficient way to pass money on as you go through your lifetime.
And one of the points I didn't get to add to this comment is Priscilla also said, I probably will not need it any time in my lifetime.
Yeah, so and that goes back to the question of, and I know if Priscilla's watched the webinars or anybody's watched the webinars, the big question is, where do we think tax rates are headed during our lifetime? If we think they're headed even 1% higher into the future, it would make sense for Priscilla to pay those taxes now, lock that rate in forever, and then what she didn't need would go to her.
And Joel, how do you feel about, I mean, this is a topic that we discuss a lot on here, but when we're talking about leaving money to our kids or teaching them how to invest and make sure that they have their own funds, how do you feel about that concept, I guess?
You know, most of the people we talk to as a result of the webinars, CR, are very disciplined and have saved large amounts of money. So I don't think we should live our lives based on, wanting to pass all our money on to our children. But the result of the baby boomer generation, mostly just working and saving and accumulating in an era where the market was really on a historic bull run, means that they are going to leave money to their children. So doing it efficiently and having their children involved in those meetings and understanding how that impacts them and what it means to manage that money going forward. I can't imagine that's not important. I think families should sit down and talk about that, and they should talk about it with their advisors. They shouldn't do that separate from their advisors, because one of the things we see in our business is that the children fire the advisor almost 90 to 95% of the time as soon as they inherit the money, and that can lead to some poor decisions. So I think everyone should be involved and talk to the advisor as time goes on.
Such great advice. I mean, I know even if we dive into long-term care, it's having those conversations and making sure that we're aware of that with our families and not trying to spring it on them or change that. And I like that you talk about as soon as that money is inherited, they cut off that relationship. And I like that you talk about working together, because this isn't just a quick scheme to get your money. This is really a lifelong, contribution of things we can put together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because those assets there was a purpose for those assets. And if that purpose is disrupted immediately, the chances of that turning out poorly for the heirs is probably significant.
And Joel, I do have another one coming here from Gary, so I wanted to pull it up on the screen here. And again, if you have anything that you'd like to submit to Joel, let's go ahead and get it up on the screen here, and we'll get this over to Joel. Joel, Gary's been on the show several times. He's a longtime viewer of the show, and he's asking about his daughter. He said, "What are your thoughts on my millennial daughter's Roth Solo K purchasing annuities, as strongly recommended by the energized guy, Tom Hagna?"
Well, Tom is an energizer bunny, that's for sure. And very, very intelligent. In fact, I just watched his economic forecast this morning on YouTube, and it was very insightful. But I agree, Tom. There are places, I agree with Tom Hagna, that annuities, we kind of use annuities strategically or surgically in someone's financial plan. And it makes a ton of sense to buy them in the Roth bucket or the tax-free bucket, simply because as time goes on and that income from those annuities increase, it does not disturb the rest of your tax situation that we such intricate planning and hard work on putting together. We don't want to disturb that by buying it in the taxable or the tax deferred bucket and then blowing the plan up later on. So owning an annuity in the Roth portion of the financial plan would be the place that you would want to own it. So I would agree for it, and you're creating income, which is what annuities are actually for.
And so when we talk about annuities, I bring this up to Dave quite a bit as well. Tell me why people are so against annuities, because I feel like this is something that we need to help educate people on to understand the importance of this.
Yeah, annuities are a tool in the tool belt, just like anything else, CR. And I think one of the big reasons that annuities get a bad rap is we're comparing apples and oranges, even amongst annuities. Many people don't like or are talking negatively about variable annuities, which can have very high fees and are still subject to the ups and downs of the market, which is what people sometimes are trying to get away from when they purchase the annuity. So one of the things that we educate people on are all the different types of annuities, what they do, what they don't do. And then they begin to understand through that course of education that, well, there actually is a place for an annuity. Maybe it's not what I thought it was, but it can actually be beneficial inside a well put together financial plan.
And Joel, you brought up a really important piece. I think a lot of people forget when we talk with our advisors is the education side, because when people hear the word advisor, they feel like he's going to push all these products on me. It's not going to be the right fit for me. But what you're saying is I'm here to help educate you so you make the right decision, and together we can pick the right products for you and for whatever you're trying to achieve.
That's exactly right. And I think people sometimes probably get a little frustrated from our end of it, because we educate for several hours before we actually implement anything. A lot of front-end loaded education when we do planning with people. But the reason for that is that we are fiduciaries, and we feel very strongly about the fact that available to you out there. You should know the benefits to it. You should know the downside to it. Then you can make, as a client or as a consumer, an educated decision on what those products or investments do for you. And you can lay your head on the pillow at night knowing that you made the right decision for yourself and your family.
And I really like that. And I appreciate that because, again, we're here trying to help educate people. That's why we started this whole retirement risk advisor side, is because we wanted people to have the proper education. So when they sit down with their advisor, they know what to do. They know how to talk through this conversation and not make it one-sided. And I appreciate what you're saying in this regard.
It all comes down to communication, CR. That's the most important part in the relationship.
And Gary, thank you so much for submitting your question. And once again, if you're here live, please go ahead and submit your questions. And if we can get another break, we'll go ahead and get those over to Joel. And if you're watching on replay, go ahead and get your questions submitted to us on retirementriskadvisors.com, and we'll get those on a future show. All right, Joel, let's get back over. I've got a question here from Lisa. Are you still keeping the emergency 6 months bucket in the cash account in order of liquidation scenarios when you are discussing liquidating the cash bucket?
Yeah, another good question. And the answer is absolutely yes. We want, and I talk about this in the 4-hour webinar, the Changing World of Retirement webinar that we do with Dave. And one of the things that we've come to kind of suggest for clients is not just 6 months in that bucket, but up to 2 years in that bucket as you move into retirement. And for this specific reason, we want cash in there, not only to take advantage of opportunities coming forward, but if we can get that cash out of there and the third bucket by using the tax law, the progressive nature of the tax law, through order of liquidation planning, then we absolutely want to do that. So very important to still keep the money in there when we're talking about those order of liquidation scenarios and being able to take advantage of any opportunities that come along because of that.
And Joe, let me just ask a question since we're talking about this emergency fund. If you are in retirement, do you still need 6 months in this emergency fund?
Yeah, I would highly suggest you still have 6 months of cash living expenses in an emergency fund that you're never going to touch. Again, the rate of return conversation always comes up, but it's not a rate of return question. It's just a purpose question. And then we would also like, again, a year or up to 2 years of cash sitting there. Doesn't have to be necessarily just in cash. It can be in some other things, but also that money allows us, there's some strategic planning around that allows us to take advantage of maybe a dip in the market when that comes along, because we know that's going to happen. But if you have all your cash tied up or somewhere else, it's just, you're unable to take advantage of that opportunity. So we want to have 6 months set aside and some more cash to take advantage of opportunity as we go forward.
I love to hear that. Let's go over to my next one here from Larry. Do you know if 401k plans allow for conversion of the employer contributions into the Roth part of the plan while the employee is still actively contributing?
Yeah, good. And I would highly recommend it, but it's all going to be up to how your plan was written, Larry. So the easiest way to find that out is to do a call to the plan administrator. Ask them that specific question. You're going to need to have two things happen. You're going to have to be able by plan convert the money to the Roth 401k and then be able to invest it after that. So, but those are all by plan rule. So if you call your plan administrator, ask that specific question, you should be able to get that answer with no problem. Some plans will allow you, some plans won't.
And Joe, what if we're just on a regular 401k and we don't even know if there's Roth options available through our employer? What's the best option to do for that?
Another call to the plan administrator. We've had several times where we called people would tell us that they do not have a Roth option in their 401k plan. We get on the phone, let's say it's Fidelity or Merrill Lynch or whoever it might be, get on the phone to the plan administrator, ask that question, and guess what? 30-40% of the time, they find out that they actually have a Roth portion in their 401k plan. So a 5-minute call sometimes surprises you and allows you to get a lot of money into that tax-free bucket on a year-to-year basis.
Jill, do you find it easy that when you give that as a recommendation that people are able to go on and take care of that? Or do you see people being held back because, again, they don't know what to say or don't even know how to approach this?
Yeah, we usually do 3-way calls with people, especially if they're in another state, where we'll get on the phone with them and have them get through the security process and then tell them that we're on the phone with them. And we ask the question specifically because there are some curveballs thrown at you once you get into the system. So if you ask a question, or they ask you a question that as a consumer you don't know the answer to, you certainly don't want to make a mistake. So what people tend to do is just hang up and not pursue it anymore. So it can happen. You can be intimidated by those persons. They're really good though. I found the service are actually very good. One thing to do is maybe call 2 or 3 times, see if you get the same answer. It's like calling the IRS, right? You might call 5 times to get 5 different answers, but if you get a majority answer, then it's probably correct.
And I was going to say Social Security, so you're not far off.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wanted to pull up a kind of a follow-up question here from Gary again. So again, Gary's joining us from Facebook. We are here on Facebook and YouTube. And Gary's wondering, my millennial daughter currently owns an IUL. Would you recommend that she purchase additional IULs to enhance her tax-free bucket?
Yeah, really good question. And again, we use IULs, or Indexed Universal Life, for people that are on the call that don't know. But we use them all the time, again, kind of strategically in our business. I think they're a fantastic tool to be able to accumulate money on a tax-free basis. The answer to that question would be how it's designed. If it's designed to allow her to, the one she owns is designed to allow her to put more money in, I think there's no reason to buy another one. But if she's max funding that contract and she's unable to keep the tax advantages and contribute more to that Indexed Universal Life, then purchasing a second one wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think it might make a lot of sense, especially if she's maxed out on other areas of investing for retirement.
Great answer. I wanted to bring this up because this is actually one of the questions I have from Gary here. Let me pull it up on my original piece here, and I'm going to talk about this. Jacqueline is wondering, can you please talk about the backdoor mega Roth? And let me pull up one more piece here, because Gary's also saying, do you think the mega backdoor Roth IRA will be repealed?
So it survived the first cut. Yeah, it was part of the Build Back Better plan that in that law that did not get passed before the end of the year. And that was on the chopping block, that mega backdoor Roth. So say that one 5 times fast, Sierra. That's tough to do. So, but it was on the chopping block, but it survived that cut. So we still have right now this year, 2022, to take advantage of a backdoor mega Roth. So and basically what that means is after you max out your 401k contribution, you can then contribute, if your plan allows you to contribute after tax dollars to that plan up to the amount of $38,500, and then immediately convert that money to the Roth portion of the plan. So again, it's a great way, if your plan allows for this to be done, to actually get a bunch of money into that tax-free bucket that you otherwise couldn't get in there in a real hurry. So if it's available this year, and I think eventually it will go away. So I think we should all try and take advantage of it this year if we have the ability to do so.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that. Now, Joel, it comes to the point here where we're almost ready to wrap up. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you? Because again, if people are watching, they're saying, man, I really, really like this. I'd love to be able to hear some more from you and get some education, because really what you're doing is you're educating so people can get the best idea for what they can do for their future. Yeah.
And we love the education part, CR, like you said. And I think that just fits in so well with Dave Hall's philosophy. He's all about education, and we are trying to be the implementation arm of that education. A lot of ways to get a hold of me. I'll just give you a couple. So number one, you can always call or contact Retirement Risk Advisors, and they will put you in touch with me. You can go to our website, which is wymerwealth.com, W-Y-M-E-R wealth.com, or you can call me directly or text me directly. I'll give you my cell phone number. It's 330-671-5039. You can get a hold of me at any time, day or night. I'm in Miami, Florida on vacation. So if you have a question, I'll continue this after the call and we can answer some more questions.
And I did put the link in there for you as well. So retirementriskadvisors.com/Wymer, and you can get a little bit more detail there of what Joel's talking about. And Joel, I'm going to throw one more question at you just as we get going here. We've got E-Ring again joining us from YouTube. What is your forecast for the market in 2022? I hope you know this because I'm waiting to get that answer as well. When would you recommend doing Roth conversions at market highs or wait for the market to drop?
Yeah, well, really good question. Mr. Bring has good questions. I know him, and he's a very intelligent guy. So that's the question. What's going to happen moving forward in 2022 and beyond for the markets? We're due for a correction. A normal correction. We had one in 2020 when coronavirus shut down the economy. That was short-lived, and it came back as quickly as it fell. So we're probably due for another one, and that's healthy for the markets. What I would say as far as the Roth conversion question is, if you strategically do Roth conversions when the market is lower, we've run those numbers, and you can cut your tax bill significantly, 20, 30, 40%, by taking advantage of the dips and doing Roth conversions at that time and allowing those dollars to recover in the tax-free bucket. It's the only time you'll get the IRS to be your partner in paying the tax. And if we can do that, I think that's always a good thing.
Such great advice. Joel, again, thank you so much for being here with us today and answering these questions. I always know it's a fun show when we can bring the advisors we work with through these changing world of retirement webinars. And we're so grateful that you were able to come on the show today and talk about retirement. And I just want to see if you have any parting words as we're just starting the new year. We're getting ready to do things from the beginning again. And I would love to hear some advice.
Yeah, well, I know, again, I really enjoyed doing this. It's fun I hope we provided some value for people today. We had some great questions, but my advice would be get started soon. There's no better time than to start planning and doing some of these things tax-wise and strategically right now. I know we're going into a season of extremely busy times for CPAs. A lot of the people on the call are probably CPAs. But if you can carve out just a few minutes, I think it would be well worth it. Get some of that foundation laid and then have a plan for 2022 and beyond, and you'll be much better off.
I love it. Thank you so much, Joel. And again, we're always here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. If you didn't get your question answered, come back and join us next week. Or again, you can submit that at retirementriskadvisors.com, and we'll see you guys again next time.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.